is Ethan, and this happened to me when I was living alone in a small apartment in the city. It was a night I'll never forget. I had just moved into the building, a modest place with peeling paint and creaky floors. Everything seemed normal until the first night I noticed the apartment directly across from mine. At first, it was nothing unusual. Windows, doors, typical city apartment life. But then I began noticing strange lights flickering at odd hours. Sometimes, the apartment would be completely dark, and suddenly a single window would glow with a dim, pale light. One night, around 2 a.m., I couldn't sleep. I went to my balcony for a cigarette. The street was quiet, and only the apartment across the street had the light on. I leaned on the railing, smoking, and noticed a man and a woman inside, standing very still, almost like statues. Their heads were close together, and I could faintly hear what sounded like whispering or muttering. I strained my ears, but it was hard to understand. Minutes passed, and their movements became strange. The man's gestures were stiff, unnatural, and the woman seemed frozen in place. My stomach twisted with unease. Something about them felt wrong. I blinked, and suddenly, the man's face caught the light in a way that made my heart stop. I could swear it was exactly like my own face. Every detail. Same eyes, same jawline. My hands shook. I told myself it must be a trick of the light, a reflection, or maybe just my imagination. But the feeling in my chest tightened. Fear, disbelief, and something darker I couldn't name. The woman suddenly moved closer to him, and I noticed she wasn't moving naturally. Her head tilted unnaturally, her arms stiff. My mind screamed that this wasn't real, and yet I could see every detail. I stumbled back from the balcony, my heart racing. I tried to call a friend, anyone, but my phone screen flickered strangely and then went black. For weeks after that night, I began noticing more things. Sounds from the empty apartment. Shadows moving behind the curtains, always when no one should be there. Sometimes, I would catch glimpses of the man across the street standing perfectly still, staring directly at me. But when I looked again, the apartment seemed empty. One night, I dreamt that I walked into the apartment across the street. The man approached me. I felt his eyes on me, and my own reflection stared back, but it wasn't me. My reflection smiled, a cruel, knowing smile that froze my blood. I woke up sweating, heart pounding, and for days I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching me. I decided to investigate. I spoke to neighbors, asking casually about the apartment. Everyone shrugged. "No one's living there," they said. "It's been empty for months." Empty? Then, who had I been watching that first night? I told myself it had to be a hallucination. Stress, lack of sleep. I tried to ignore it. But the flickering lights, the shadows, the figure with my face, it didn't stop. One evening, I returned home late. The building was unusually silent. I stepped into the lobby and noticed a small envelope slid under my door. Inside was a single piece of paper. Written in neat, unfamiliar handwriting, it said, "You are not alone. I have always been here, waiting." I dropped the paper, my hands trembling, my mind erased. Could it be a prank? A neighbor with too much time? But the handwriting, it looked eerily like my own. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the window, eyes fixed on the apartment across the street. And then I saw it. The man. My face. Standing at the window. Watching. Waiting. I didn't dare blink. My mind was screaming, heart pounding, stomach twisting. And then the man raised a hand, pointing directly at me. Suddenly, my own hand rose on its own. I had no control. My body obeyed some unseen force. The man's lips moved, and I felt like I could hear him in my mind. "You belong to me." I collapsed onto the floor, shaking, unable to move. When I looked up, the apartment was empty. The lights were off. Nothing there but shadows. I tried to leave the building, move out, anything. But no matter where I went, I felt watched. Mirrors became my enemy. Reflections sometimes didn't match reality. My face in the glass sometimes smiled when I wasn't smiling. Weeks turned into months. Friends noticed I was pale, anxious, restless. I didn't tell them about the man across the street, the figure that was somehow me. Then one night, I received another envelope. Same handwriting. This one read, "Time is shorter than you think. Soon we will be one." I realized then that it wasn't just a hallucination. It was a warning, a doppelganger, something that was waiting for me, or waiting to replace me. I've moved apartments several times since then. Each time, I check across the street. Each time, I see the flickering light. Each time, I see him. My reflection. My double. Watching. Waiting. Sometimes, I catch myself staring into mirrors for hours, wondering if I'm really me, or if the man across the street has already started living my life somewhere else. I don't know if this will ever end. Maybe it's a curse, a psychological trap, or some strange cosmic joke. But I know this. The apartment across the street will always be watching, and so will he. And sometimes, late at night, when everything is quiet, I hear a whisper, faint but clear. "You're mine."
I wish I could say that I have nothing to fear, but the truth is, fear is my constant companion. I've seen things that I can never unsee, and I don't know how much longer I can bear it. It began with a Senaf Waite, but even that wasn't the most disturbing part. It was her father, Ephraim Waite, who truly terrified me. The house they lived in was dark, oppressive, and it always smelled of dampness and decay. Asenath led me to a sitting room where her father, Ephraim, sat in a chair by the fire. There was something wrong with her. He had an unnatural influence over his daughter, and I began to suspect that she was more than just a woman. But I was drawn to her. It wasn't attraction in the typical sense. It was more like an irresistible pull, like something ancient and forgotten was calling me toward her. There was something about her, a coldness in her demeanor, a sharpness in her eyes, that unsettled me from the start. The Waite family had lived in the town for generations, and there were whispers about them. Whispers that even I, a rational man, couldn't ignore. I arrived at the mansion just after dusk. Asenath and I became friends, or perhaps, more accurately, I became someone she could use. At first, I dismissed them as the usual town gossip. At least, that's how it felt. The door creaked open before I could knock, and Asenath stood there, pale and emotionless. Her black black eyes fixing on mine with an intensity that made my blood run cold. We sat in silence for what felt like hours. Asenath is still out there, somewhere, and the thing that walks in her skin still hungers. I turned toward the door, and there, standing just beyond it, was a figure. It was never Asenath. It was always her. What did he mean? I didn't understand. Not fully, but in that moment, I knew one thing. I was trapped, caught between the nightmare in the doorway and the old man in the chair who had not moved a muscle. I've tried to forget. I've tried to bury the memories of that night deep within my mind. She had been distant lately, her behavior increasingly erratic, and I couldn't help but feel something terrible was going to happen. I turned and ran. I bolted through the door, through the house, out into the night. I've seen the way she looks at me from the shadows, that same cold, dark gaze. The voice came from the doorway. It wasn't Asenath's voice. No, it was something far more insidious. But I know, deep down, that I will never escape. But I couldn't escape it. That thing in the doorway, that was what she truly was. But as I stood to go, something happened. I could still hear that voice, faint but insistent, calling me back, begging me to return. It wasn't Asenath. And the worst part? I'm beginning to feel her calling me again. The eyes were wrong. Far too large. They glowed with an unnatural light, and when it smiled, I saw teeth, sharp, gleaming, and not at all human. The name may not mean anything to you, but it's burned into my mind forever. Don't fear her, Ephraim's voice rasped. It's only a temporary arrangement. Eventually, I could take it no longer. My nerves were fraying, and I excused myself, saying I needed to leave. And I know now, what Ephraim said was true. A guttural, rasping whisper that chilled me to the bone. That was when I heard it. A voice, faint at first, but growing louder. I had no idea what I was walking into when I accepted her invitation to dinner that night. He was an old man, twisted and frail, with a voice that rasped like the wind through dry leaves. A being that had taken her form, an entity that had inhabited her body for years, lurking beneath the surface, feeding on her life force. Asenath was not human. I turned, half expecting to see the wind blowing through a cracked window, but there was nothing but darkness and the oppressive weight of the house around me. His eyes glimmered as he watched me, but there was something off about them, something unnatural, like he wasn't really seeing me at all. "Come in," she said, and I followed her into the house. I tried to make small talk, but his answers were short and cryptic, his gaze never leaving me. There was an odd stillness to the place, as though it was holding its breath, waiting for something. Asenath watched me with that same unsettling intensity, and I could feel her eyes on me even when I wasn't looking at her. She wasn't like other women. There was something otherworldly about her. I staggered backward, my heart racing. I wanted to scream, to run, but I was frozen. "Don't go. Stay with me." The door opened slowly, almost imperceptibly, and I felt a cold, suffocating presence. The inside was just as oppressive as the outside. Furnishings covered in dust, cobwebs in the corners, the faint scent of something metallic in the air. There were rumors that Ephraim was a scholar of forbidden lore, that he dabbled in things man should not know. The thing in the doorway was a grotesque mockery of her, a twisted, malformed version, its skin pallid and stretched over an impossibly thin frame. That is, until I met Asenath herself. She spoke in strange riddles, and her eyes, whenever they caught mine, seemed to peer into the deepest recesses of my soul. I can hardly bring myself to recount the events I witnessed, but you must hear the truth. It weighs heavily on my soul, and I must confess it, for my heart aches with the burden of it all. I am a man of reason, a man of science, and yet what I have seen has shaken me to the core. It began with my friend, Dr. Henry Jekyll, a man of great intellect and kindness. Jekyll had always been held in high regard among our circle of friends and colleagues. We had known each other for many years, and I admired his work in medicine and chemistry. He was a man of duality, as most of us are, but I had no idea how deep those divisions ran. Dr. Jekyll, as I've come to realize, was a man struggling with a part of himself that he could neither accept nor understand. He had told me about his experiments, his attempts to separate the good from the evil within himself. I remember laughing at him, thinking it a foolish fantasy. But when I learned what he had truly done, I could not laugh any longer. It was late one night when I first encountered Mr. Edward Hyde. I had heard rumors of the man, of his terrible temper, his inexplicable fits of violence, and his strange appearance. People spoke of him with fear, and I admit I was curious to meet him myself. Hyde was known to frequent a shabby building in the poorer part of town, a place I would never have ventured on my own. One evening, as I was passing by, I saw him. Hyde, the very man who had been the subject of our gossip for weeks. He was shorter than I had imagined, but the way he moved, the cruel twist of his smile, and the madness in his eyes made him seem far more menacing than his size suggested. He didn't even acknowledge my presence as I stood watching him, and I felt an involuntary shiver crawl down my spine. After that night, I began to see him more and more often. Hyde would appear on Jekyll's property at strange hours, sometimes even disappearing into the doctor's home at odd times. I confronted Jekyll about it, but he always dismissed my concerns, laughing it off as if Hyde were nothing more than a fleeting acquaintance, nothing to worry about. But I was not convinced. One evening, as I waited in Jekyll's study, I noticed something strange. A vial of strange liquid was sitting on the desk, dark and thick like molasses. Jekyll had been working on a new formula, he told me, something that would bring out the hidden aspects of human nature. He explained it with a sense of quiet pride, but there was something in his eyes that unsettled me. Later that night, I witnessed something I will never forget. It was after midnight when I was awoken by an unnerving sound, a violent crash, and then the unmistakable sound of laughter, but it wasn't Jekyll's voice. It was rough, jagged, full of malice. I rushed to the source of the noise, only to find the laboratory in disarray. The vial shattered on the floor, its contents spilled across the marble tiles. But the most shocking thing was what I saw next. Dr. Jekyll, my friend, was gone. In his place stood the creature I had met before, Hyde. His face twisted into a grotesque grin, and his eyes gleamed with something that resembled madness. The transformation was not subtle. It was as if the very essence of Jekyll had been ripped away, leaving only this vile, monstrous figure in his place. I could hardly comprehend what was happening. My friend, Dr. Jekyll, had vanished, and in his stead was this depraved individual who had terrorized the city. Hyde's appearance, his mannerisms, everything about him was a stark contrast to Jekyll's calm demeanor and intelligence. The very air around him seemed to grow heavy with the presence of evil. Hyde spoke to me in a cold, almost amused tone, explaining the nature of the transformation. He told me how Jekyll had created a potion, a chemical mixture that allowed him to transform into another person, someone without the moral constraints that Jekyll had spent his life adhering to. Hyde was the manifestation of Jekyll's darker desires, his unrestrained urges, freed from the bounds of his conscience. I was stunned. I could hardly believe what he was saying, but the evidence was clear. Hyde was the result of Jekyll's reckless ambition, and the transformation had made him into something entirely separate, an individual who reveled in violence and cruelty. I begged him to stop, to return to the man I had once known, but Hyde only laughed. "You don't understand, utter son," he said. "Jekyll is gone. There is no turning back now. I am free." In that moment, I knew that my friend, Dr. Jekyll, had become a prisoner of his own creation. He had sought to separate the good from the evil within him, and in doing so, he had unleashed a nightmare. I had no choice but to leave. Hyde disappeared again, and Jekyll returned to his normal self, but he was forever changed. The man I once knew was now a shell of himself, tormented by the very thing he had created. I could see the deep sorrow in his eyes, but it was mixed with something darker: fear, regret, and an undeniable longing for the release that Hyde gave him. Over the weeks that followed, I tried to help Jekyll, but every attempt to reach him seemed in vain. His battle with his darker self was a losing one. Eventually, he locked himself away in his laboratory, refusing to see anyone. I did not hear from him for days, and then, one morning, I received a letter from Jekyll's hand. In it, he confessed everything: his experiments, his transformation into Hyde, the horrors he had committed. He told me that he could no longer control Hyde, and that he feared the worst was yet to come. When I arrived at his home, I found the laboratory door locked from the inside. The sound of desperate movements came from within. With a heavy heart, I broke the door down, only to find a lifeless body of my dear friend, Dr. Jekyll. He had taken his own life, unable to bear the horrors Hyde had brought upon him. The letter he left behind was a final plea for forgiveness, a final confession of his tragic mistake. But it was too late. The man who had sought to unlock the secrets of the soul had, in the end, been undone by his own darkness. Now, as I recount these events, I wonder how many of us, deep down, are hiding our own monsters. How many of us would be willing to face the truth of what we are capable of if only we dare to look? In an old, decaying mansion on the outskirts of a forgotten town, there were whispers of strange occurrences. The house had stood abandoned for decades, yet every time someone dared to enter, they reported seeing dolls, dozens of them, all scattered throughout the rooms. But the most terrifying part wasn't the dolls themselves. It was that they were always watching. And when the town folk spoke of it, they mentioned something far worse than dolls. They spoke of the dolls beneath the floor. No one dared to speak of what happened to those who tried to dig them up. Henry, an antiques dealer, had heard the rumors for years. He'd never believed them, of course. Dolls? Just old children's toys. But when a wealthy client offered him a handsome price to find rare items in the mansion, he couldn't resist. The mansion, long abandoned and overgrown with ivy, looked innocent enough from the outside. Inside, dust covered the furniture, but there was something unsettling about the silence. As he explored the empty halls, he found what he was looking for. Dozens of porcelain dolls lined the shelves of the dusty room, their eyes lifeless but too lifelike. It was as though they were waiting for something. But as he moved closer to examine one, a strange sensation washed over him, a cold shiver running down his spine. The air smelled of something rotten, but Henry was too focused on the dolls to notice it first. He reached out to touch one. The eyes of the doll seemed to follow his every move. As Henry rummaged through the house, he found a trapdoor beneath a rug in the corner of the room. Curiosity overtook him. He pulled the trapdoor open, revealing a dark, narrow staircase leading down into the basement. The air in the basement was thick with decay. The walls were lined with even more dolls, but these were different, worn, tattered, some were missing limbs. Their porcelain faces cracked, but still, their eyes seemed to stare back at him with a horrifying intensity. The most disturbing thing, however, was that beneath them, in the floorboards themselves, something was moving. Henry felt a sudden urge to dig, as if something was compelling him to reach deeper, to uncover whatever was hidden beneath the floor. The wooden planks were warped, cracked, and worn, but the sound of something scraping underneath drove him to continue. He pried up the floorboards, and as they creaked open, he saw it. Dolls, dozens of them, entombed beneath the floor, their bodies crammed into a tight space, their faces frozen in expressions of horror. But these dolls, they weren't just dolls. The eyes moved, the mouths twitched, and the air began to vibrate with a low, mournful hum. A voice, deep and echoing, seemed to come from within the floorboards, as if the dolls themselves were speaking to him. "Let's out." Before he could react, The ground beneath him shuddered. The doll's eyes blinked open fully. Their heads turned, one by one, following him with an unsettling, synchronized movement. Henry stumbled back, heart pounding, but his feet were rooted to the floor. He felt oppressed. Henry woke, but it wasn't the world he had known. He was no longer on the cold floor of the basement. Instead, he found himself surrounded by dolls, hundreds of them, all lifeless once more, their eyes closed, waiting for the next unwitting soul. A whisper brushed against his ear, just barely audible, "You belong to us now." It wasn't just the dolls that moved. Henry's limbs twitched. He reached up to his face, and in the reflection of a nearby, cracked mirror, he saw it, the horrifying truth. He was becoming one of them, his body slowly changing into porcelain, the coldness creeping into his bones. His limbs stiffened, his skin turned pale and lifeless, his mouth barely able to form words. And then, the voice again, louder this time, "Now you will watch." Evelyn woke up the next morning in her nearby house, unaware of the horrific events that had unfolded in the mansion. But she couldn't ignore the strange feeling that something was wrong. She looked outside, and as she gazed across the hill, she saw it. The dolls, hundreds of them, standing perfectly still in the windows of the mansion. The wind whispered softly through the trees, and with it, she heard a faint voice, distant and haunting. "Let me out." The dolls wait, always waiting, hungry for new souls. And every time someone enters the house, the same thing happens. They join the collection. The floorboards shift, and the dolls reach up, pulling them into the depths, trapping them within the walls for eternity. The town will never speak of it, but the whispers can still be heard in the wind, begging for release. And once you've entered, you will never leave.
A few years back, when I was still a teenager, my best friend Daniel and I were just a couple of broke high schoolers trying to make ends meet. So when we heard old Mr. Whitaker was looking for help cleaning out his massive estate just outside of town, we figured, why not? He was an odd figure. When we met him, he wore thick gloves, even in the summer heat, and spoke in clipped, almost rehearsed sentences. Still, he offered us $100 each per week, cash, just to dust, sweep, and clean out the house room by rooms. Seemed like a dream job. It wasn't. The house. From the outside, the house looked like something out of a forgotten century. Towering and covered in tangled ivy, its windows dark and lifeless. The front gate groaned like an animal in pain every time we pushed it open. The garden was wild, overgrown, and oddly symmetrical, as if it had once been beautiful and someone had tried and failed to keep it from dying. The first time we stepped inside, something felt wrong. The air was thick, stale. It didn't smell like dust, more like old fabric, rotting wood, and something sickly sweet beneath it all, like flowers left too long in a vase. I remember Daniel paused in the doorway. "Dude, this place gives me the creeps." I laughed it off. "Yeah, but it pays." We got to work, sweeping floors, clearing cobwebs, wiping grime off walls that hadn't seen sunlight in years. The silence of the house was oppressive. Even when we spoke, our voices sounded muted, swallowed up by the vast, decaying walls. The doll. On our third day, while cleaning what looked like an old parlor room, I spotted it. Sitting alone on a high wooden shelf was a porcelain doll. It was no bigger than a toddler, dressed in a tattered red velvet dress, its face cracked along one cheek. One of its glass eyes was cloudy, while the other was crystal clear and blue. That single eye seemed to fixate on me the moment I entered the room. I froze. "Hey, Daniel, you see this?" He walked over, squinted, and recoiled slightly. "That's the creepiest thing I've ever seen." "I hate dolls," I muttered. "Why would someone keep that thing?" We left it where it was, not wanting to touch it. But after that day, things started changing. The whispers and shadows. The first sign was the whispers. They started soft, just at the edge of hearing. At first, I thought they were drafts through the old vents. But no, these whispers had rhythm, words. They sounded like a child singing a lullaby in a language I didn't understand. Daniel heard them too. One afternoon, while mopping the hallway outside the parlor, he suddenly dropped the mop and turned pale. "What?" I asked. He stared into the shadows near the stairwell. "Something just laughed." I listened. "Nothing. You're messing with me," I said. But then I heard it too, a low, breathy giggle that echoed through the walls, and the air turned cold. I mean winter cold. Our breath began to mist in front of our faces. The next day, Daniel showed me scratches on his back. 3 long, thin marks like something had clawed him while he was scrubbing the bathroom upstairs. The moving doll. It got worse. The doll. It started to move. At first, we thought we were imagining things, but on multiple occasions we found it in different parts of the house, even though neither of us had touched it. One morning, it was sitting in a rocking chair in the upstairs hallway. The next on the piano bench in the music room. Once it was perched at the very top of the staircase, facing downward as if watching us. I tried to laugh it off, tried to rationalize it. "Maybe Mr. Whitaker's messing with us," I suggested. "He's old, maybe he thinks it's funny." Daniel shook his head. "He hasn't even been here since the first day. You've seen how he never enters the house." And it was true. Every day he'd unlock the gate, let us in, then vanish. The night it came alive. We should have quit. We talked about quitting, but curiosity is a stupid drug and we were hooked. On the 7th day, something happened that neither of us could explain or forget. We were finishing up late. The sky had turned orange outside. Daniel was in the kitchen and I was upstairs, collecting tools. As I turned the corner into the parlor, I stopped dead. The doll was there, standing, not sitting, standing on the windowsill, arms stretched out, head tilted, and it turned to look at me. I screamed. Daniel came running, and when he saw it, he screamed too. And then the lights flickered, the walls groaned, the temperature dropped instantly. And from behind us, we heard footsteps, slow, dragging steps, like bare feet across wooden floors. We turned. Nothing. Then came the voice. A child's voice, soft and broken. "You shouldn't be here. Mr. Whitaker's return." We ran, or tried to, but the front door slammed shut and wouldn't budge. Daniel was banging on it when Mr. Whitaker finally burst in through the back, his face pale, eyes wide. He was carrying a small wooden box and a black vial of liquid. "Where is it?" he hissed. "Where's the doll?" We pointed. It was now seated calmly in the middle of the room, its eyes dark and hollow. Mr. Whitaker stepped forward, uncorked the vial, and poured the thick black liquid over the doll's face. He chanted in a language I'd never heard, harsh, guttural, ancient. And in the shadows of my room, just for a second, I see something small, something wearing red velvet, watching. Two years ago, I moved to Texas with my best friend and roommate, Sarah. We rented a small, cozy apartment on the outskirts of town. I've always had a fascination with dolls, not the plastic kind, but those beautiful porcelain antiques. To me, they weren't creepy, they were comforting. So, on my birthday, when Sarah handed me a delicately wrapped box, I was thrilled. Inside was the most stunning doll I had ever seen. Her skin was pale porcelain, smooth except for a faint hairline crack under her right eye. She had cascading auburn curls and the most hauntingly vivid blue eyes I'd ever seen. Eyes that glistened like glass but somehow felt alive. I was in awe. "I saw her in an antique shop and immediately thought of you," Sarah smiled. I named her Hazel. She took her place of honor on my nightstand, facing my bed. At night, her eyes reflected the soft light of my lamp. They sparkled, almost too much. In the beginning, everything felt fine. Hazel added charm to my room, and I found her presence oddly comforting.
But that comfort began to sour within a week. It started small. My phone charger would be unplugged in the morning. A spoon I knew I had placed in the sink would be back on the counter. I blamed Sarah at first, thinking she was playing pranks, but she swore she wasn't. Then came the whispers. At night, just as I was drifting to sleep, I'd hear faint murmurs. Soft, female, like a lullaby sung through clenched teeth. I'd sit up, heart pounding, but the room would be silent except for Hazel's eyes, reflecting moonlight, staring directly at me. I told myself it was stress, a trick of the ears, but the feeling of being watched grew stronger, heavier. I couldn't shake it. It followed me from room to room, especially when Hazel was nearby. One night I awoke with a start, my arm stinging. When I turned on the light, there were 3 long, thin scratches running down my forearm. I checked the sheets, my nails, even under the bed. Nothing. But Hazel, who normally sat upright, had slumped forward, her face turned toward me, mouth slightly agape. The next morning I found strange symbols drawn in soot on the mirror. Circles within circles, lines like thorns twisting into runes. I wiped them away quickly, refusing to acknowledge the fear spreading in my chest. That day I went to see Father Thomas at the small Catholic church down the road, a kind older man with tired eyes. When I explained what was happening, he grew silent. "Camila," he said gravely, "some objects carry spiritual residue, negative energy. They can become vessels, homes for things that should not walk this world." He offered to cleanse the apartment and banish whatever was attached to the doll, but I couldn't do it. I couldn't give up Hazel. She was a gift from Sarah, a symbol of our bond. So I politely declined. That night the whispers returned, louder, clearer. I heard my name spoken with a breath that wasn't mine. "Kama, help me." I froze. My entire body went numb. Hazel sat in her usual place, but her head had turned slightly. I was sure of it. Her eyes gleamed unnaturally in the dark. Still, I didn't scream. I didn't run. Instead, I replied, "What do you want?" There was no answer, but something shifted. The air grew colder. My breath fogged up. Hazel's eyes seemed to soften for a moment. I told myself I was imagining it, but deep down I knew I wasn't. From then on, I began speaking to her. Every night, whispered conversations in the dark. I told her about my fears, my childhood, my dreams. I shared things I had never even told Sarah. In return, Hazel never moved, never answered again. But she listened. I could feel it, and I felt connected. But the deeper our connection grew, the darker the apartment became. The lights flickered constantly. Cold spots would appear in corners. Sarah started having nightmares, screaming in her sleep. Once, she woke up with a nosebleed and a bruise in the shape of a small handprint on her thigh. She asked me to move Hazel into the closet. I refused. We argued. Then one morning I found Hazel sitting on Sarah's pillow. Neither of us had put her there. That day, Sarah packed a bag and left to stay with her sister. She never came back. Left alone, I sank deeper into Hazel's world. The symbols reappeared, carved into the wooden floor this time. The walls began bleeding, ever so faintly, around the baseboards. Not red, something darker, black, like oil. At night, I'd hear footsteps circling my bed. My reflection in the mirror would sometimes smile when I didn't. My fingernails turned brittle. My skin grew pale. I barely slept. And still, I couldn't part with her. Then came the night I truly lost control. I was lying in bed, eyes closed, when something crawled onto my chest. I opened my eyes, but saw nothing. I couldn't move. It was like being pinned down by invisible hands. My chest burned, my vision blurred, and then I heard Hazel again. But this time, her voice was not soft. It was desperate, screeching. "Kama, don't leave me!" I screamed. My body jerked free. I lunged for the door, but it slammed shut. The windows rattled. Hazel had fallen off the table and lay face up on the floor, smiling. Blood dripped from her porcelain lips. That was the moment I finally broke. The next day I called Father Thomas. I begged him to come. This time he brought help. 3 people in dark robes, carrying candles and vials of holy water. They set up quickly, chanting as they surrounded Hazel. The moment they began, the room changed. The temperature plummeted, the windows shattered, the floor shook. Hazel shrieked, a high-pitched sound that came from nowhere and everywhere. Her mouth opened wider than it should have, revealing a cavern of black. Father Thomas shouted ancient prayers. One of the robed women collapsed, blood pouring from her nose. The lights exploded, but still they continued. The chanting rose to a fever pitch and then silence. Hazel's body cracked, a line running straight down her face. Her eyes rolled back, and then stillness. She was gone. They sealed Hazel in a glass case, wrapped in silk with runes burned into the fabric. She was taken to a private museum that specialized in cursed objects, a place far from here, far from me. I watched them carry her away, and I wept, not from fear, but from something else, grief. Even now, months later, I can't explain it. Was Hazel truly evil, or was she just misunderstood? A spirit reaching out, confused, lonely, clinging to the only person who ever listened. My room is empty now. Peaceful, yes, but sterile. Cold, quiet. Too quiet. And sometimes, just as I'm falling asleep, I swear I hear it again. A whisper. Come on. And I wonder, did I really save myself, or did I abandon her?
Julie is a 21-year-old woman living in San Francisco, a college graduate with a good degree but struggling with a low-paying office job at a small consulting firm. She is smart, ambitious, but weighed down by financial burdens, tuition debt, supporting her family. The dream of a university lecture hall in Canada, of white snow and a bright future, seems too far away. The burden of tuition debt and the desire to support her parents makes her feel suffocated. She realizes that with her current salary, that dream will always be just a dream. That night, in her small bedroom, Julie surfs the internet and stumbles upon articles about girls earning thousands of dollars a month from OnlyFans. At first, she brushes it off, feeling it is not suitable for her. But then, the images of bills, debt figures, and worried faces of her parents appear again. After a fierce internal struggle, she took a deep breath and made a decision. It's just temporary, she told herself. Just enough money to support my dream. I'll have it under control. She carefully created an account under the name Julien, filmed a short introductory video with a somewhat forced smile, and posted her first photos, which were still quite discreet. The first notifications of subscribers and small tips made Julie both happy and nervous. After a few weeks, she had a steady following, paying $10 a month. Gradually, she grew bolder, posting more daring content as requested. The money in her account grew, and the Canadian dream seemed a little closer. She promised herself that all of this money would go toward her education, and when she had enough, she would stop. Julie's life now alternates between two worlds, the dull office worker by day and the charming Julien online by night. One day, she attends a business conference at a fancy coffee shop. She feels out of place among the men in suits, the talk of contracts and profits. She smiles, handing over dozens of business cards with her full name, company, and, unfortunately, her home address, an odd requirement of the company to establish trust. That evening, Julie receives a notification that a new subscriber named John Smith has registered. He immediately texts her. The conversation starts out normal, even humorous. But Then the questions become more personal. Do you have a dog? Are you dating anyone? Do you live with your parents? Julie, still naive and thinking that this was just a fan's way of getting to know her, answered all of them without thinking. Little did she know that each of her answers was providing the anonymous person with valuable information. After learning that she lived alone, because she said her roommate was away on a business trip, John Smith started making more daring requests in exchange for generous tips. One odd request was for a photo of her feet, then friend request on Instagram for $10. Julie hesitated, but the money was too tempting. She thought, it's just a friend request. What's the big deal? Julie accepted the friend request. She went to John Smith's profile and saw that it was completely blank. No posts, no followers. But there was an orange circle glowing around his profile picture, signaling a new story. Her heart skipped a beat. She clicked on it. The first story was a short video of her house from a distance, in the woods across the street, posted 2 hours ago. Julie shivered. It must be a coincidence, she tried to reassure herself. She swiped to the second story. This time, the video was from across the street, zooming in on her bedroom window, the only room with a light in the house. The video was posted 5 minutes ago. Julie's blood ran cold. Trembling, she swiped to the last story. It was a video shot right on her porch, looking through the glass. He's right here. Immediately, a message popped up on the screen. Let me in. Julie screamed, throwing her phone onto the bed. She heard the handle on the front door downstairs being turned roughly. She dashed out of the room, locking the door behind her, her hands shaking. She called her father. Her voice was lost in sobs. Her father, who had been enjoying the trip, suddenly became serious, ordering her to call the police and find a place to hide. Soon after, she heard a loud bang, followed by the sound of broken glass. He had entered the house. Julie panicked and ran into her parents' bedroom, remembering that there was a way to the attic. She heard the stranger's heavy footsteps coming up the stairs, and he called out Julian in a creepy voice. She quickly pulled down the attic ladder, climbed up in the dark, and pushed it up with all her might, slamming the door shut as soon as he burst into the room. Julie lay huddled on the dusty attic floor, holding her breath as she listened. He was rummaging around, breaking things. A moment later, she heard police sirens getting closer. The intruder ran away. By the time the police and her parents arrived, the house was in ruins. The police found traces of chloroform on the broken living room window. It was then that Julie remembered the business card she had given to dozens of people at the conference. Her stalker, who knew she lived alone and didn't have a dog, was one of them. Julie deleted her OnlyFans account and all her social media. The money she had made now only brought back horror. She decided to move to another city with her sister. Although the stalker was still at large, her life had changed forever. Julie got in the car with her sister, heading to a new place. She still occasionally startled and looked back. The haunting image of the faceless man in the blue shirt still there. A bitter reminder of the price she paid for her dream. Meera Kapoor lived with her parents in a lavish apartment in Mumbai. Her appearance had changed drastically over the last few weeks. Her skin had lost its glow, her cheeks were hollow, and her eyes were sunken as though every drop of life had been drained from her body. Her mother, Nandita, could hardly bear to see her only daughter in this condition. Every night she sat by Meera's bedside, silently weeping, praying for her recovery. Meera was adored by her colleagues, her neighbors, and her extended family. No one could imagine what misfortune had suddenly struck her. It had started innocently. First, a low fever, then recurring headaches, and within a month, Mira was bedridden, slipping in and out of consciousness. She had been taken to some of the best hospitals in the city, yet her condition worsened day by day. To make matters more devastating, her wedding was only weeks away. Seeing her condition, her fiancé's family broke off the engagement. The Kapoors, desperate, invited a priest to conduct rituals in the home. But instead of improving, Mira's state took a terrifying turn. Late one night, the household was startled awake by a chilling scream. Rushing to her room, Nandita and her husband, Raghav, found the lights flickering and the room unnaturally dark. Mira was clawing at the wall with her bare hands. Blood streamed from her fingers, but she showed no sign of pain. "Mira, what are you doing, child?" Nandita cried, trying to pull her back. Mira turned her head slowly, her eyes glowing red, and a twisted laugh escaped her lips, a sound so cold that Nandita felt her body tremble. From that night, nothing was the same. Mira screamed at unseen figures, spoke in guttural tones and languages unknown, and often sat staring at the wall for hours. Doctors dismissed it as a psychiatric breakdown and advised immediate admission to a mental health facility. But her parents refused to believe it. They clung to hope, believing something else was tormenting their daughter. At this time, Raghav's elder sister, Shanti Devi, came from her ancestral village near Nashik. She was a woman of age and experience, with lines of wisdom carved into her face. Having grown up amidst tales of spirits and rituals, she immediately sensed something was wrong. When she approached Mira's room, she stopped at the doorway. A strange heaviness pressed against her chest. "The air here is not clean," she muttered. "This is no illness." Inside, the curtains were shut, the air unnaturally cold. Symbols were scratched into the walls, and Mira sat hunched in a disturbing posture, her eyes blood red. Nandita whispered, "Sister," before she fell ill. She had gone somewhere. Last month she went to Himachal Pradesh for work. Shanti's face darkened. Since she returned, her health has collapsed. Then I fear she has brought something back with her. Your daughter is not ill, she is possessed. If we don't act soon, we may lose her. The very next morning, the family set out with Mira for Himachal. But the road itself turned into a battlefield. In the car, she screamed and laughed hysterically, at times trying to smash the glass windows. Her voice changed, sometimes whispering curses, sometimes crying, and other times muttering, "He is waiting. He will take me away." Raghav gripped the wheel in fear, but they did not stop. After hours of struggle, they finally arrived at an ancient temple, hidden deep in the Kulu Valley, dedicated to a fierce local deity. The temple walls bore strange inscriptions, and the surrounding forest seemed alive with whispers. Inside waited a frail old sadhu whose eyes held a piercing intensity. One look at Mira and he declared, "This is no ordinary spirit. It is the wandering soul of a man who died unmarried, cursed to roam and seek a vessel. He has chosen your daughter." The parents fell to his feet. "Save her, please, Baba. She is our only child." The ritual of blood and fire. That night, a haven was prepared. Mira was placed before the sacred flames. The sadhu chanted fiercely, but Mira only sneered. You cannot free her, the voice growled through her lips. She belongs to me. The Baba knew the spirit would not leave without a price. A sacrifice must be made, a goat and wine to appease him. Though horrified, the parents agreed. A goat was brought, and as the ceremony reached its height, Raghav placed a plate of meat and a vessel of wine before Mira. At once, her eyes lit with ravenous hunger. She lunged forward, snarling. The sadhu held back the plate. Only if you release her, spirit. Choose, the girl or the offering. I want the offering. Then I will leave her body, the voice growled. The sadhu pushed the plate toward her. Mira tore into the meat like a starving beast, devouring every piece until she collapsed unconscious. When she awoke, she was herself again, weak, frightened, but free. Back in Mumbai, Mira slowly regained her strength, but Nandita's mind was unsettled. She had to know how this began. Reluctantly, Mira recounted the trip. She and her colleagues had gone trekking. Her friend Ria led her deep into the woods for photographs. But then, Ria disappeared. Alone, Mira had heard a strange voice. A shadow appeared before her. After that, nothing. Suspicious, Nandita confronted Ria. At first, Ria denied it, but soon her face twisted into a cruel smile. Yes, I left her there. I was sick of Mira. Everyone adored her. The boss, the team, even the man I loved chose her. That forest is cursed, and I knew the spirit would take her. You nearly killed my daughter, Nandita shouted. You can't prove it, Ria smirked. No one believes in ghosts. But Mira had secretly recorded her confession. Within days, Ria was dismissed from her job in disgrace. Years have passed, but Mira still struggles with trust. She fears friendship, for betrayal hides behind smiling faces. And though her health is restored, her eyes sometimes wander to the shadows, as though she remembers the spirit that almost claimed her. And I, as her mother, still wake some nights to the sound of that laughter echoing through my mind.
It was just another rainy night in the city, cold and empty. David sat alone, the glow of his phone lighting his tired face. He kept swiping through strangers, one face blurring into another. Then suddenly, her picture appeared, beautiful, distant, unsettling.
With a hesitant smile, he pressed match. The lights flickered once, then again. But David didn't notice. She messaged first. Friendly, simple, too perfect. They talked for hours. Days passed like minutes. Her profile changed, now only the eyes remained, staring like this. He sent a selfie. She replied with only a smiling emoji. He laughed, unaware of how hard the rain had started falling. Then came the message.
Let's meet tomorrow night. He looked up. 11:11. A strange chill crept down his spine. The room went dark. Outside, the storm began to howl. He stared into the rain, as if something might stare back. One last message. See you soon. His breath caught. He stood before the mirror, fixing his hair like it actually mattered. He chose a shirt. The light above him buzzed, and the mirror shimmered. Something fell, a sound too sharp in the stillness. This...
He walked to the cafe under the rain, not knowing what walked with him. The door chimed softly, like a breath before a screen. He waited. Minutes dragged like hours. The ticking got louder. A shape formed outside the fogged glass, unmoving.
She entered without a sound, eyes locked on his. The cafe light bent oddly around her skin, like it avoided her.
Her smile widened. Her eyes didn't blink. In her pupils, he saw himself, smaller, distorted. He greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Her hand met his. It felt like touching winter itself. They sat together. The silence filled the room like water. He talked to stay human. She nodded to stay convincing. Her stare was endless. Her eyes didn't need to blink. He looked away, heart pounding louder than the rain outside. The lights dimmed. The world drained of warmth and color. Her drink sat untouched, but the face in it wasn't hers anymore. They stepped into the rain. He offered the umbrella. She didn't need it. Water slid off her, untouched, as if it feared to stay. He spoke nervously. She walked in silence, too quiet, too still. Back home, the hallway lights blinked, like something was trying to break through. He opened the door for her, like he always imagined doing on a real date. It twisted, just a flicker, but David's skin crawled. He filled a glass, hands shaking. She hadn't moved since stepping in. He held the glass out. Her eyes were fixed on nothing, or everything. Her shadow peeled from her feet for a second, and then snapped back. He stared. Her nails, they were growing. He swallowed hard, smiling like it was all fine. Her face turned toward him. The smile widened, wider than skin should allow. Darkness, then light, and she was right there. He stumbled back, breath catching like it hit a wall. Her hand scraped across the floor, a sound like metal on bone. His phone buzzed. The selfie he'd sent was wrong now. His vision blurred. The room tilted like it was sinking. She leaned in, whispered gently,
You live alone, don't you?
His eyes widened, realization blooming like ice in his chest. The clock ticked slower, each second stretched like something trying to escape it. Her face cracked wide open. Black eyes, splintered skin. Time reversed. The clock spun backwards, erasing logic with every tick. He tried to crawl away. Something pulled him back, something not bound by flesh. Lights flickered violently, like the room couldn't decide what was real. She climbed over him, not walking, but folding, like a nightmare taking shape. In his eyes, her true form was revealed, and it had no mercy. He screamed, but silence held him tighter than any hand could. Reality cracked, walls bent, the air itself trembled with something ancient. Then, nothing. The room was empty. David was gone. Security footage showed him, laughing, talking to no one. Each time the light blinked, she was closer, until she wasn't there at all. His laptop blinked, again and again.
Do you see me?
From his phone, fingers stretched, long black, seeking him. David vanished. Only his phone remained, buzzing like it still had something to say. The room sighed into silence, as if he'd never existed. Through the window, a soft red glow pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Her face flickered through screens, searching, hunting for the next match. 3 knocks, from nowhere, from everywhere. Her profile was back, new smile, same eyes. She was online again, waiting, watching. The window glowed red, like a wound in the dark. The curtains stirred, but the air was still. His phone came alive, a new profile, her face, her smile, unchanged. One new match,
Just one, always one. Faces flicked by, each one unaware they were next. A cheerful message.
Hi there, Saul. Wanna meet tonight?
Ooh. The smile twitched, then blinked, as if aware.
From the shadows, the tapping began again. Soft, steady, closer. Long black nails scraped across the floor beneath the silence. David was gone, but the cold remained. Look closely. It's not David she's watching now. It's you. Your turn. Knock, 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 knock. You matched.
She's coming.